We are going to get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here tonight for our Authors on Tap reading series. We are Exile and Bookville. We're closed for the day, but still aren't used to how incredible it feels to host an event in the store, even if it is virtual. And what an event this is going to be. Today, Parakeet finally sees the light of day in trade paperback, and tomorrow marks the 1-year birthday of Parakeet in hardcover. So congratulations, Marie. And what better way to celebrate both occasions than having Marie in conversation with local phenom Rebecca Makkai. This is where I usually tell you what both of these amazingly talented writers have accomplished, where they live, and how many kids and or pets they have. Instead, there's so much to cover tonight, we will just jump right in. You're all in for a treat tonight, but before we get started, I want everyone to know that you can purchase both books in this store. Parakeet will come with a signed book plate, and The Great Believers has already been signed physically by Rebecca Makkai. I personally saw her do that. You can also go to our website, exileandbookville.com, and order one to be held or shipped to you anywhere in the US. For the event, we encourage everyone to keep their cameras on, but please mute yourself into the Q&A portion of the event. Questions and comments can be typed into the chat, where Rebecca will field them and get them to Marie towards the end of the event. Really looking forward to this. We're so excited. I want to hear what you guys are going to talk about. Everyone enjoy the show, and good luck, Marie and Rebecca. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And we really would love it if people want to turn their cameras on. It's much friendlier, I think, when we can see everyone, if your Wi-Fi will permit and you're not, wearing a mud mask right now or whatever. Or if you are, that would be amazing. So Marie, happy book birthday.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I am so happy that you.
That is so exciting. If other people could mute themselves who are not Marie, it would probably be really helpful. Thank you. This has got to feel so wildly different. The book came out, it sounds like June 2nd of last year, which is a time we all remember. Actually, it's a time we don't all remember is the problem. And, it's not a completely back to normal world, but feels like this is coming out in a really different time. Does this feel, obviously hardcover to paperback is going to feel different, but does this feel more festive, less festive?
The paperback coming out?
Yeah.
It's about the same because I'm still in my living room. Which I'm not complaining about. Last year when the hardcover came out, it was a day publishing had declared Black Day. No posts about anything publishing related on that day. So the day felt very quiet. And, we're in the middle of an enormous civil unrest. The week before, protesters had been tear gassed in my hometown of Philadelphia, protesting the murder of George Floyd. And we were in a pandemic. And it's not that I wanted my book to come out when there wasn't a civil unrest or a pandemic. It was that I wish there hadn't been reasons to have a civil unrest and a pandemic. And so I was just in a state of collective grief with the rest of the world. And every so often I would remember I had a book out, and that was like a nice moment of joy. But other than that, I was with everybody else, just trying to move through it and help as many people through it as possible, if that makes sense. So does it feel different? A tiny bit. We're not totally out of the woods yet, but we're a lot farther, I suppose.
I think we're all also so much more used to events like this and used to this sort of gathering from around the world. It doesn't feel as, I think there's a sense in which we can kind of forget that we're on Zoom once in a while, because it's just started to feel like part of the way we interact. Whereas I'm sure that last year it was still just figuring things out on the fly and reimagining events that had been planned in a different way too.
Absolutely. And we're veterans now.
Yeah.
You know, none of us was an expert of living through a pandemic a year and a half. I think that we've all gained our expert badge together. And so some things I will miss. Like, I love the fact that my mother, who is here, hi mom, my mom has been to every single reading and event that I've had. You know, you can join from anywhere in the world. I think it makes it more accessible to a lot. And that's been really nice. And I hope we take some of those great lessons with us when we're all, you know, back out in the world.
Yeah. There's so much I think that's just going to continue. Like, we'll be back in person, but I think the average book tour after this is going to include several really online events for people who live in places where they couldn't get, or just, you know, they're never going to tour us to, you know, the middle of Kansas, but there are people there who love to read. And actually, that's not true. There is a really good bookstore in Wichita, but you know, there are places where they don't tour authors, and it's good to be able to reach those people too. So.
I've been in Kansas. I took a road trip in September, and I went to Lawrence, and I'm forgetting that beautiful bookstore in Lawrence. I stopped by. They were closed, unfortunately. Watermark, Christine Vine says. That's the one.
Watermark is the one in Wichita.
Yeah, she's from Wichita. She's calling out her hometown bookstore.
It's a great store. Yeah.
Christine, can't remember. But yeah, so I think you were wise to avoid publishing The Beautiful Great Believers this year, Rebecca. Good. Very smart. But yeah, how did you find it? How are you liking the Zoom universe?
You know, it's okay. I actually, there's certain things I like about teaching on Zoom. Yeah. For, like, you know, I'm teaching grad students and postgrad, so it's not like I'm trying to corral second graders on Zoom, which would not be fun. But I like the sort of egalitarian nature of it too. Like, I can look at everyone at once and not just the people who talk the most. Mm-hmm. And I think I like the people can talk or use the chat box, which is kind of cool. But yeah, my next book will come out next year at the earliest. And so it's like, I might, if I'm lucky, I kind of might miss the height of the Zoom book tour and have kind of a normal one. I don't know. On that note, before we get too far into things, I know we're going to have you read. Before we do that, if I could just ask the participants again, if you are not Marie, there's, I think, one other person with a microphone on. If they could turn their microphone off, that would be really cool. Or maybe Javier, someone could mute them. But Marie, I understand that you're going to read something from actually near the end of the book. Is that right?
Yes, I am. So this comes with, thank you, Rebecca. This comes with a disclaimer. If you do not, so I'm going to read the first couple paragraphs of the last chapter. Then I'm going to stop and invite Javier to the screen. And he is actually going to finish the reading tonight. And just a word about why I'm doing that. We've all been cloistered inside of our homes and not able to connect this year. And yet, Javier from Exile in Bookville, a bookstore that I've never been to in real life, and I have been chatting through Instagram all year. And he was just so kind to me all year and about this last page of the novel. And so I thought it would be lovely if he read it for us tonight, and it would be a real treat for me. So I'm going to read, I'm going to start, and then I'm going to stop and give anybody a chance to turn their volume down if you don't want to hear the very last page of the novel. And then Javier's going to finish it up. So here we go. This is the last chapter. I've been married hundreds of times. If I were to subject myself to that which I subject others and build a diorama of my life, I'd place a petite, ethnically ambiguous woman at a table in a red kitchen. It would be summer, her favorite season, yet she'd be wearing jeans because she's ashamed of the plum-colored scarring that maps her right side. It would be her grandmother's kitchen. On the table, a miniature box of ginger snaps, and a pair of binoculars used to spy on the neighbors. If I were ambitious, I'd string wire from the outside gutter to a plastic tree, and on it, I'd place a few judgmental budgies whose bright colors don't belong in New York's palette. The woman's conversation partner, her grandmother, would be a realistically rendered parakeet, because there can be no accurate representation of my life that doesn't include an element of oddity that has always been a border between me and the right-minded world in which women walk down aisles experiencing simple happinesses. I'd build the bird myself, every gentle feather. People who know me now don't know I was ever married or estranged from my sister. I think about my wedding on nights I want to remind myself of myself. Life has no past tense. To remember something is to relive it. I'm smiling at my sister, and I'm also lying prone in the ambulance covered in a thin sheet. I'm watching a woman mail her shoes. I'm with my grandmother in the antechamber. I'm breathing on a bench in Union Square, helping Danny overturn cushions to find the remote on an endless, unremarkable day. My great-grandmother is always curling her hair, gazing over the roiling sea. The parakeets are always blinking into the cracked sunlight and realizing this is somewhere much harder than Argentina. The street dancer is always looking over her remarkable shoulder, and I am always lying on that floor in shared blood, reaching toward Una in her last moments and finding myself, as I always do when in fingertips distance of connection, lacking. How do you be a bride? I asked the hairdresser on the morning of my wedding. This is the first time I've been one. And now I'm going to invite Javier to the screen and give anybody who doesn't want to hear the last page an opportunity to turn the volume down. Standing offer, turning the volume down on me. We're just going into the other room for a moment. And Javier, do you want to finish this up?
Yes. Thank you, Marie, for letting me do this. Bear with me. This passage is pretty incredible, and I want to try to do it justice. I meant, how does one join oneself to another? Thinking of it now, there are many ways. Renting space within my mother, Rose turning at the sound of her name, listening to my sister's tender voice. There are intimacies that don't involve marriage, just as there are marriages that don't involve intimacy. The mind provides the only possible privacy, so what is more intimate than thought? If intimacy is marriage, I am married to anyone I've carried in my mind. If intimacy is marriage, I felt more married to the EMT who would have left, but instead pressed her palm against my heart for the length of several breaths to make sure I was still tethered to the world. That EMT married me, if you will. Will you? If you see I do, these are vows. Will you stay if I change into something you couldn't anticipate and don't recognize? Will you be honest with me when I'm present, about me when I'm absent? Will you encourage me to be as much like myself as possible? Will you hide what I use to cause pain? The drugs, the credit card, the words? Will you take my picture in front of every tree I like from now until? Will you not only look at, but delight in what I point to? Look at the sailboat. Look at the moon at its brashest, the parakeet activating out of the dusk. Every day from now until ellipses, again, until, again, say yes and we are married. If intimacy is marriage, every time you are my first thought upon waking, we marry again. Simone slips her hand into mine, a simple movement like an afterthought. We peer at the body of water, waiting for something to arrive, willing to believe that whatever does can be good. I hold my sister's hand, a small, precious bird. Thank you.
Good job, yay!
It's just incredible. And it's, I just reread the book very recently, and I think that ending actually just meant something completely different to me than it did last time, which was only a couple days ago, which is a really good sign of things that deepen, as you return to them rather than thin out as you return to them. So I want to ask you a kind of big, maybe craft question in a sense. This is, in many ways, fundamentally a book about trauma, remembered trauma, present trauma, the way trauma stays with us, the way trauma changes us. I have a lot of students, very talented students, who want to write similar things in the sense of some past event that we don't totally know about yet when the book starts. It kind of follows a character around and overshadows their life. And the problem they constantly run into is it just feels like, they're taunting us, withholding information, whatever. And it also can feel like it's just about someone walking around with their feelings rather than there being a real plot. So this is maybe a multi-part question. I'm curious how you managed to put together a book that's fundamentally tilted toward the past, in a sense, without it getting slowed down, bogged down in that past. Maybe I'm going to start with that, and then I have follow-up questions rather than ask you 5 questions at once. But how did you manage to have a book that moves forward and tilts forward so well, at the same time that really this is a book about memory and trauma and the past?
Well, I love that question so much. I have very similar students, and the answer is actually very simple. I think because you phrased the question so well. It's the wedding. It's the wedding. Without that wedding, the past would have taken over the present day timeline. And I find in stories that you're describing, the past is taking over the present day timeline because not enough is going on in the present, right? So you have to have both of those arcs building at the same time in equally dynamic ways. And then, as Amy Hempel said, where they overlap is the climax. And I mean, that's not a perfect equation, but it's just a nice guideline to build on. And having an event like a wedding that's essentially like 7 days of prep to the wedding created the right momentum, I think, so that it didn't tilt so far that it toppled.
Yeah. And a wedding is something with its own pre-existing expected structure, right? It's not like you're introducing us to the concept of a wedding. Like, you say wedding and we know what we're supposed to expect. And it is this like ticking clock. Yeah. So, okay, then my next question, because I mean, that was how I would have answered that question for my students too. If someone had said, well, why does this work? I'd be like, it's because of the wedding. Which came first? Did you start, was this really sitting down and writing a book about a wedding, or was the wedding a later addition or compensation? Does that make sense?
Yes, the wedding came first. I wanted to write a story that deconstructed the expectations that you just mentioned of a wedding and of a bride. And so the wedding came first, and then I knew she was injured. I knew she was troubled. And that's the part that I kind of had to allow to come to me, to reveal itself.
Yeah. And all that stuff comes through in this wonderful sort of dream logic, which is something else that I think this is a book that I'm going to be, if not assigning my students, just thrusting at my students for a long time. Because I think the one thing that I've been seeing from all levels of students right now that's kind of, I just want to shake them loose of it, is this idea that in order to get out of the present moment, people need to like have some excuse to experience a memory. Like they're looking out the window and it's like, and I saw a tree and it reminded me of Florida. Yes, Florida. Suddenly it was as if I were there on that day 5 years ago. Blah, blah, blah. And then something has to like shake them back out of their memory at the end. And it's this like, there's something not only about memory and the way you use it, but about absolute dream logic of like things are happening that couldn't happen or don't seem like they really are happening, but they are within this world. There's such a fluidity to that. And it allows us to get into that memory and trauma in ways other than flashback. Even though certainly we have memory too. So what was your, I mean, again, 17 questions related to this thought that I'm having, but was this always a book in which there was sort of, I don't want to say supernatural because that feels like it is one facet of what's going on, but was this always a book that followed dream logic? Did that come in? Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. And I also want to say that I've read a lot of those student stories too, where the tree is outside and then they have a memory about a tree. And I'm always thinking, or I write in their notes, this is a very convenient tree. Like, thank God that tree was there so you could have the narrator. And that's why I'm a little bit suspicious of flashbacks and the occasion for flashbacks. I either think you have to do what they call hang a lantern on it, which is like, just acknowledge that they're just go into flashback, just do it and say this, and like just the story itself acknowledges that it's a flashback, or do it in a way that is subtle and kind of elucidates how we actually move in memory. Because I mean, even as I'm sitting here, the memory plane is going on and on.
Yeah.
And so making that literal on the page is a reflection of what I know about trauma, what I know about what it does to memory, what I know about, I did work with people living with traumatic brain injury, and I have had my own trauma. And so the line in the book that says, trauma logic is the same as dream logic is true. I mean, that's just accurate. We experience trauma as if we are in a dream and we're swimming and we're not getting anywhere. And so for me, even in my very first short story, which was a story called North of, the character was having flashbacks, but they were in the present tense and they were folded in to the present action. Because even at that, I guess even when I first started writing, I wanted to make it literal because that's how I experienced memory.
Yeah.
And so my flashbacks are normally in present tense. In Parakeet, they are in present tense. So you're in the past, but you're, like from the section I just read, you're reliving that memory. And so it is your present tense as you're remembering it.
I love that. And this is so like, I think that it feels, one of the many reasons it feels so false to like flag memories as sort of this experience that comes at you in one chunk and then leaves you. It's certainly just not the way the brain works, but also when you're writing, when it's not just a plot device to get in the backstory, but it is in some ways the subject of the narrative. Memory and trauma and survivor and all that, survival, all those things. The treatment of them is so important. So, North of is your Bob Dylan story, right?
Yes.
I love that story. People need to read it. It's in your first book, right? It's in your collection.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the book that brought me to Ithaca, where we met, right, Rebecca?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I love this because Eleanor Henderson, who's a brilliant author, who's one of the two people basically who introduced us, is here. And then I would have read your book anyway, but Javier is the one who, like, last year before it was out, was like, you have to read this book. So I feel like there are two different people here, at least, who kind of brought this all together. It makes me very happy. Yeah, we were both brought in to Ithaca College in New York. Oh my God, a while ago now. probably 9 years ago, something like that, 8 years ago. And you had Mr. Fox with you. You had this little dog who was wonderful. Was that his name?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I bring my dog everywhere. I am just that person. I'm so sorry. I'll just bring my.
Why would you apologize? It's a wonderful thing.
That is trick. But yes, I did bring my dog.
Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, and we were there with several other authors, and it was like, emerging writers festival. So what do you think? Do you think, have we emerged? Like how do you know when you've fully emerged?
That is the question. That is so funny. Rebecca, I am going to deem you having emerged. I think that you are
emerged as well. I think
you are a butterfly, you are fully, but yet we'll keep our youthful spirit at the same time.
Yes. Yes, a friend and I were joking at one point about having a submerging writers festival for like people just it's like my best book was 2 books ago kind of thing. No, I still feel like we're emerging in a good way. I don't know. What's that?
Me too. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Continue.
So this was your 3rd book. You had the story collection, and then you had 2 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas. Is that right? Is it 2 a.m.? I'm very bad at remembering any numbers at all, so I'll change numbers in titles too, or I'll be like, catch 34, and people look at me like I'm nuts. And so do you feel like, I feel like with every book that I write, there are always things I look back and go, okay, I would have done this differently. You can't stay in love with your last book forever. But for every book I write, I feel like there's some kind of craft breakthrough for me. There are definitely like psychological breakthroughs because you're a different person, whatever, but there's always some kind of craft breakthrough. And I wonder if you feel like that on this book, if there are things you figured out about writing in the process of writing this book that you don't think you knew until you wrote it.
Oh, that is another great question. I would love to say yes. I'm sure there is something. I'm thinking. I will say the eponymous chapter of Parakeet, the chapter that is called Parakeet, where we find out what has happened to the bride, is maybe one of those examples of something that I wrote and I don't quite know how I wrote it. I folded memory and present action and collapsed time in a way that still kept its sparsity and its economy. And it created this clicking sound in my head. Like there was friction to that combination that I really liked. And I tried to make the rest of the book rise to that chapter. And so there was something to the economy and the kind of going for it that felt new to me. And I don't know that I exactly know how I did it.
Yeah. Well, I love your use of chapters in general. Like, I love that they're short. Like, obviously I wish the book would go on forever, but there's just something so bite-sized about them, even as there's this heavy content sometimes. I love that they have titles. It was funny because when I first read it in paper, it had been a very long time, and then preparing for this, they sent me the audio file, so I got to listen to the audio book. And it was trippy because sometimes I was forgetting that it was a chapter title that was being said. So there would be a sentence and then I'd go, oh wait, that was the chapter title, because I'd be trying to figure out what it had to do with the book. Were those, when you're sitting there and your name, I'm thinking about this with my new book. I have, for the first time ever, I have very short chapters. And I don't think I'm gonna name them. Was that fun? Was it worth it? Did you love it? Was it weird? Did you do you recommend it?
I can't recommend it highly enough. It was my favorite part. When the book was going, when I was stuck on the book, I would just work on the titles and that was just pure joy, like naming poems. Is your new book, is it like vignette short? Are they little vignettes? How short is short?
Some of them are real short. Some of them are longer. Some of them are like 2 sentences and some of them are, I don't know, but it's not like, it is a narrative, it's not like doing a Jenny O'Fell kind of thing. Like it is, it's a linear thing. So I'm just, yeah, do I know? And then I tried numbering them for a while. And then every time you move something around, it's like, oh God, I'm not ready to number these yet. This is a very bad idea. So go through and like retype all the numbers. So are you saying like, did you come up with some of those titles before the chapters were written as you're planning this out? Or is this, you've written something and then you're figuring out what it is?
I think I wrote the chapters first and then toyed with the titles for sure. I'm trying to think. There was one chapter title, A Wedding is an Internet Where Everyone Searches for Themselves.
Yeah.
That was hovering around. I may have kept a list here or there, and I knew I was going to use that, but I wasn't sure where, though every chapter was essentially about a wedding, so any chapter could have held it, but yeah.
But it's the chapter in which I think you also then explain, like, there's the whole conversation about what that means, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I want to get back to this because I had not realized that there was an autobiographical connection, that you worked with brain trauma survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, which is I hope everyone's read the book, and if you haven't, that's okay, but this is basically the job of this main character. Can you talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was hired by a plaintiff's attorney who had writers as his heroes, and figured that lawyers have to be taught to tell human stories in court. And who better to do that than a fiction writer? He also wanted someone who could write the kind of personification of pain of these clients' narratives so that the jury wouldn't just be reading a list of ailments on a page. And so my job was to personify how the pain manifested in their lives to hopefully, A, have them win their case, and B, get a sizable settlement for the injured client. And I did that for 3.5 years, and learned just so much about how isolated and isolating pain is, insurance companies, prescription drug addiction, and how alone people who are going through that feel. And yeah, and just interviewing people has just always been something I've been passionate about. And my whole life I've kind of informally been so curious, a little interviewer. And so it was kind of a natural fit. One of the best jobs I've ever had, and the hardest.
That's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, it's clear from this book that you learned a huge amount about not only the subject, but about, it's like about memory and about trauma. And had you been planning for a while to write something about that, or did this kind of creep in as the book grew?
It crept in a little. It takes me I don't know how it is for you, but it takes me a really long time to write about something that has actually happened to me.
Yeah.
There's like a 7-year percolation period, I've noticed. And then, nothing in this book has happened to me. None of these people are real people. They're sourced, they're compilations of people experiences, but none of it has really happened. And yet I still have to wait for some reason to get to a point where I can try to match words to certain things. So memory was interesting to me, and also my theater background and the fact that plays are always in present tense was interesting to me. And just, it just kind of grew.
Yeah.
As things can grow.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, you are married, so you went through a wedding, right? So you've had that experience. Very different, I know, than this one.
I've been married at least 500 times. Yeah. The story. And again, this is not a wedding I've gone through. And her is not my mother, I should say that as well. And her friends are not my friends. But yes, the wedding experience deserves some farcical treatment, I think. And I'm endlessly fascinated in stories that take place at weddings because they're so bizarre and surreal. Do you find?
Yeah, they are. And there was something, I loved the idea that there are two weddings happening in the same facility and these two brides and the two, and there's something just in that. It's not that anything particularly slapstick happens between the weddings, because you could imagine the like comedy movie version of that where everyone gets mixed up and whatever, it'd be great. But this, it's not that it turns into high slapstick, it's more just, this is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absurd in a really real way, because that is a realistic situation that happens. Like, you're not the only person. And there's just something about that duplication that's like, this is bananas.
May I share a really funny story? Well, that I was very personally tickled by. One of my dearest friends is a wedding singer. I think this started my interest in writing about weddings. And she sang for, she is a jazz singer, and she was singing for a wedding where the groom did not show up. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, the bride did not show up. Wait, yes, the bride. And yet, because the groom's family paid for the reception, they still had the reception and she still had to sing. And so they said to her, "We want you to sing, but don't sing any songs about love." And so she sat on the edge of the stage. She said every song we had was about love. So essentially they did a lot of instrumentals, she said. And her stories about weddings that she had been, I mean, I was just like a rapt audience. Every time she did a wedding, I would be like, tell me about that wedding. Tell me about this wedding. So they're just endlessly fascinating. And I'm really stories where somebody doesn't show up or something strange happens. Like my favorite one was always A Perfect Day for Banana Fish from J.D. Salinger.
Yeah, there should be, yeah, I don't know who would like, I feel like if you put together a collection of like great, weird short stories about weddings, the problem is no one getting married would want to read that because they'd all be, but yeah, at least want there to be a list of them somewhere. Yeah, that's incredible. And there's some good, there's some great seating arrangements by Maggie Shipstead. There's some that, novels that really use in a similar but very different way, use that structure of everything leading up to the wedding as kind of the ticking clock of the book. Mm-hmm. All, the good ones all do it in a really different way than each other. Which, so like what Maggie does is completely different than what you do. And this, this is not, I think we can tell from the very beginning that this is not going to be a love story. Yeah. I mean, sorry if I gave anything horrible away there, but it's, yeah.
I also love weddings on film because they're their own like horror story many times. Like The Godfather starts with a wedding, and Melancholia is an amazing wedding story that has a ticking clock, but it's not the kind of ticking clock that you think. I mean, it's just very, you see a wedding that's like, and then it was beautiful and they lived happily ever after.
Yeah. I'm not going to repeat them all now, but I have collected my own versions. I don't know a wedding singer, but I have, I just have this mental store of like real life, bizarre things that have happened at weddings that I love to tell people who are about to get married like a week before their wedding, and only the funny ones, not the but they're great. Oh, go ahead.
And Ray just said The Graduate. The Graduate is quintessential. That's the one. That last scene is just perfect. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I hope as we talk, I would really love to hear, we'd really love to hear questions from people in the audience, whether those are about the book itself or about writing or about life or about weddings or about craft. Oh, it's really funny because a really long one came in from Kevin, which is awesome. It looked like that just happened immediately in response to my question, which is impossible. But I will start by reading you this question. which is this is from the amazing writer Kevin Brockmeyer, who's here, and it has an event upcoming with Exile and Bookville that maybe Javier wants to link to at some point, because you guys should all go to that. But you guys can see he's saying this is a dreaded, not a question, but a comment about a writer who's very hard to please, who sent him this book, or sent him this last week. The best book I've read in ages is Parakeet by Marie somebody with a sort of Italian last name. She's the best new to me writer I've read in forever. The novel is absolutely wonderful. Extraordinarily high praise from a correspondent who is generally displeased by anyone who wrote later than the 19th century. So then his question, he does have a question, which is, I think of you as a writer who possesses a very contemporary sensibility, but do you feel that your work has been fed by any of the 19th century classics? I would add to that, like, or other century classics, maybe. What are your deepest roots?
Oh God.
Literature?
Oh, you all are so smart. Kevin, you tell me. Oh, what have you? Well, thank you so much for passing along that amazing. That is a statement that I'm very, very happy to accept and to hear. Thank you. That is so nice. It's also kind of hard to get my mind around and hard to believe that I did something and I put it out to the world and someone I don't know would ever be talking about it. Maybe one day that will cease seeming like a dream that couldn't possibly come true, but that's unbelievable. And let alone someone who actually knows something about, literature that way more than I do, I'm sure. In my deepest roots, I would say there's a little bit of Shakespeare, because I did do theater. And at one point, if you had asked me, I would have told you that I was going to make my living from directing Shakespeare on stage.
Wow.
Oh, can you believe it? Writing was my fallback. Theater was going to, I thought theater was going to be my career. I was a sweet, very naive little bird. But yeah, I think Shakespeare, and I did my thesis in Virginia Woolf, and Virginia, her sentences, as I was guided through them by my mentor, Dr. Vincent Cherry, who I adored, it was just like, how could someone think of doing that with punctuation? She had an entire conversation hovering over the line that was just conducted in forms of punctuation. She could have an entire lifespan in a parenthetical expression. She could do violence with semicolons. I mean, it was just, I was like, oh, that's what I would like to do. And Parakeet directly, I think, takes a few of those sentences and out for a spin, I think.
That's who I was gonna bring up if you didn't. I was gonna say, I think, but if for a different reason, which is that I think any of us working with anything that we could call stream of consciousness, which we could take really loosely or really tightly, owe something pretty intense to her, in terms of just that flexibility of the mind. And it goes back to what I was saying before, that you don't, you're not feeling this weird need to like flag memory or trauma, or like, here comes a thought, but just the slipperiness of it all.
Can I ask you, Becca, what is your relationship to forms of punctuation?
I love them. And someone is saying in the chat that semicolons are their favorite. So I have this tirade that I will go on with students who do not feel that they need to particularly pay attention to punctuation, or have just like decided to become a professional writer without actually picking up a book and learning the rules of punctuating dialogue. Like, first of all, they are the musical notation of language, right? That they control the meaning, but they also control a reader's breath and attention. And it's like, all we have 26 letters. And then these little squiggles. You're just going to ignore the squiggles? Like, what are you doing? I don't know. What about you? Do you think about them a lot? And this actually might drive, because someone is asking me about the influence of music on your work.
Yeah.
To me, these are the same thing, but maybe to you, it's a different answer. I don't know.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said about musical notation and the breath. That's where it is for me, but that is also very musical. So I love to sing, and I from my whole life I've loved to sing, and I sometimes wonder what the relationship is between like a writer's voice, like actual speaking voice, let alone singing voice, I mean, even better, and the way they punctuate, the way they put together lines. And that's why it is always my favorite to hear an author read their own work. And I don't actually believe in authors not being good at reading their own work. You know, a lot of people complain that authors are bad at reading. I would rather hear an author read their own work than hear, you know, a professional actor 9 times out of 10, because only the author really knows that breath and where the musical notation is. And I also have a very broad definition of what is considered good. But musically, I'd rather hear, Daniel Johnson sing than someone who isn't feeling their way through every line. Yeah. So long story short, music, my brothers are musicians. My father was a jazz enthusiast. My uncle was a jazz musician. It's just, my speaking voice is very important to me. My mother, who is here, has the most beautiful speaking voice. I mean, she's known for it and has been accused of sounding like a bird in public, but I love it. And so, yeah, just sound and music is my kink, Rebecca. Happy Pride. Sound and music.
I love it. That's so funny. So my sister is a professional musician. I think there's something really, I think theater and writing have a ton in common. And I didn't think it was ever going to be my job, but I was a theater minor in college, and like there's a huge connection there. Mm-hmm. But music and writing, it's not, I mean, I guess you could be like tone deaf in terms of music and be a brilliant writer. I'm sure that occurs, and there are, but I don't know, is it more, maybe it's more rhythm, it's something that it's the musicality that you get into a line. That is still musicality, even if you're not also a violinist. It is hugely important.
Oh, absolutely. That's maybe what I was trying to say. You could be literally tone deaf and be a beautiful musician. I mean, you could have no hearing and be a beautiful musician and a beautiful writer. It's something else. It's not, it's maybe just having like a meaningful relationship to the idea of how these words sound and the rhythm and the vibration that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think one thing that is true of your writing which is true of a lot of my favorite writing, that comes across as pretty effortless. It doesn't feel showy. There are a few times when a line draws attention to itself. Like you have one sentence in particular that's like a very long, angry rant kind of line. Right. But that's a very intentional moment there. But for the most part, the musicality is in service of rendering the language not invisible, but translucent, I think. So that we're just seeing straight through it. We're not noticing, we're not hung up on like the gymnastics of the sentence. I don't think people, go ahead.
I hope so. Yeah, because that would be, or, only calling attention to itself when it kind of decides to. Yeah.
It's, I don't think a lot of people understand like the amount of work it takes to get something to the point where you don't notice it intentionally, right? Like the musicality that goes into just like, no, it's the breath and the meaning and the whatever, but it's not coming at you like a sentence with a capital S. I don't know.
I'm assuming that you read your work out loud.
Yeah, sometimes literally and sometimes more just, yeah. Do you?
Wait, what was the sometimes just, do you have some?
I mean, yeah, sometimes literally out loud, and sometimes it's more like you're reading really slowly for sound, but you're in a Starbucks. So you probably, you know.
I that's a huge part of it too, reading it out loud a few times.
Yeah. So we told each other that we were going to do a lightning round to each other, and I think the time has come. And I think we should do it. So I have like a story. You have them on paper. I just have them in my head. I hope I don't. But we have to, I think, are we both answering both? Or are we just answering the other person's?
We can both answer both.
Okay, that sounds.
And you want to go back and forth, like one and one?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you a question first?
Go for it.
Okay. What is the best thing about your dog who's on screen right here?
He is so super loving. It's ridiculous. How about you?
The best thing about my dog is that she talks. She just, it's like whole conversations back and forth with you. It's hilarious. It's great.
Oh, that's amazing. And my dog is literally silent. He doesn't bark. And so I should also say that, so we should try to answer them without thinking, which is the hardest.
Yes, it is.
As I'm sure you are an overthinker. Okay. If you have any job in the world outside of publishing and education and talent don't matter, what would it be?
Theater. What about you?
Singing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. The place that you have not been able to go to since the pandemic started that you are the most excited to go to once it's over?
Movie theater.
Yeah. I just want to throw up like a dinner party, but like in a restaurant, I think. Like, I don't know, it doesn't even matter. I just want to get together like a group of people who don't all know each other and then let them get to know each other.
Oh, I love that. Okay, someone just said karaoke, and that's funny because my next question is, do you have a karaoke song?
We do. I have to have backup singers in order to do it, but rumor has it by Adele.
Whoa.
Yeah. If you're an alto and you can belt and you get backup singers, it's a decent one. What's yours?
I don't like karaoke and I don't like to do it, but I will be your backup singer. I will do to help you out. I will be the backup singer. Song early Aretha Franklin. I've never sung it in karaoke, but if they ever have it, that's called Ain't Nobody. And I would sing that in karaoke if they had it.
Yeah. Okay. What is the cheesiest thing that you willingly watch on TV?
Cheesiest. Well, I don't know that Real Housewives counts as cheesiest because their problems are real and profoundly deep, but I guess Real Housewives. How about you?
I have watched Real Housewives. It's been a while. I will never turn on HGTV like myself, but if I'm in a nail salon and they have it on, like Hometown Makeover or like any of those, and then I will I'll be like, oh, my nails need like 20 minutes to dry more so that I can see what they do to these people's living room.
Okay, this is a kind of a 4-part thing, but you'll understand.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not interested at all and 10 being super interested, rate your interest in the following. Okay, number 1, Mayor of Easttown.
Intrigued, haven't seen it. So 5.
Okay. Summer clothes.
What?
Summer clothes.
Summer clothes?
Like, you know how we're coming into the summer and we're all like coming out of our apartments and houses.
Okay.
And it's, how psyched are you about?
Oh, yeah, 9.
Oh, that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Benifer.
Ooh, kind of like a 9. I just want I want that to work.
Okay. I'm learning so much about you. This is great. Oh, and the last one, being a good cook.
Ooh. Yeah, 10. I don't cook often. I cook when I cook, it's like a whole thing. But yeah. Okay. So,
when you cook, what is your thing that you love to cook?
I do. So if I were having people over for dinner And I'm really like, this is my thing. I would make paprikash, which so Hungarian like chicken paprikash. And then like stuff to go with it. And I bake bread, I do stuff like that. So I get like, should I ask you the same questions, the same ones, or should I give you 4 different things? I want to give you 4 different things to gauge your interest in them.
Go
Okay.
for it.
Okay, so the first thing is skincare.
What was that word?
Skincare.
Oh, skincare. How interested am I in it? I mean, how interested should I be in it? 10. How interested am I in it? 2.5.
I think it's really funny now. Some people are like so intensely into it, and it's yeah. And some people are just like, whatever. Okay. Canadian politics.
Oh, well, I think I would really 10 on behalf of First Nations people, because Canada needs to do a hell of a lot better by their Indigenous population. But everything 0, like -5. I don't really care.
I had a boyfriend in college who somehow ended up against his will, basically in a Canadian history seminar, and with a professor who cared about it just deeply. And this guy was just suffering through the term, and he'd read aloud to me from this Canadian history textbook with like great pain and suffering. Okay. The Miss America pageant as a phenomenon.
0. Are you interested in that?
No, but I'm really interested in it as a cultural artifact. Like I've read like New Yorker articles about like that kind of interest. I'm fascinated with it.
Is your next book about this?
No, but I've thought about it. I've really thought about it.
I'm having an intuition. I love that.
No, but like someone, because there have been infiltrators, and I'm really interested in the infiltrators.
Oh, I saw that movie. Sandra Bullock was.
Oh, sure. But there have been like there was like a feminist interrupter. At like several different points. There was like in the 60s, there was this total feminist interrupter who like got in, and then like, yeah. So that would be, but I'm not writing that right now.
That's cool. I would be interested in that.
Yeah, that actually, the question I wanted to end on anyway, it's not really a lightning round thing, but what is your next book, and are you working on it? And if you can tell us as little or as much as you want, but what can you say?
My next book is called Beautyland, and it is a memoir of an alien girl who is sent to Earth to take notes on human beings to send back to her dying planet. And so it is the lifespan of all of the notes that she took while she was here. I've been working on it for a while. It's based on a story in the first collection. And so I've been researching more for this book than any other book I've written about extraterrestrial life and SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and Carl Sagan and Jill Tarter. And it's been, and UFOs, obviously, and then aliens in popular culture, like E.T. and the alien and all of that. So it's been so interesting.
Do you believe in them?
Believe in what?
Aliens? I mean, like intelligent extraterrestrial life, I guess.
I almost feel like it's like not even something you believe in or not. Like they 1,000,000,000% exist. And something that Carl Sagan said. So I've watched all of his lectures and read all of his thoughts and thinking. And one thing that he said that I find endlessly interesting is that, you know, they're probably so unbelievably more advanced than we are, that if they ever really did try to make any contact, they would have to metaphorically speak very slow. So there's this astronomer, Jill Tarter. She was just interviewed on Being with Krista Tippett. Highly recommend that interview if any of you are interested in this. And she talks about what they're looking for and what they're able to find right now, and how it probably won't happen in her lifetime, but probably in, you know, sometime in the near future. I think they're gonna do it.
Wow.
So I'm not an expert, though. I am literally just a fiction writer writing. But That's what I would say. Yeah.
That's so cool. Oh my God. So it's called Beautyland. Is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yes.
Which should also be the title of a Miss America novel that I end up writing at some point. We'll have 2 books called about very different things, both called Beautyland. Not really.
Yeah. And then we'll do a crossover sequel.
Totally. Yeah. I want to, first of all, thank you so much and for spending your paperback publication night with us. And Exile in Bookville, for those of you who don't know, it is a brand new independent bookstore, but with deep roots in the indie bookstore world and in Chicago. And they would be a fantastic place to order 7 extra copies of Marie's book from tonight, so you can give it to everyone for their summer reading. And yeah, see, Javier has so many copies on the wall behind him. We should.
They're all back there.
Yeah.
And more.
Yeah. So thank you all.
Yeah. And Rebecca, thank you. And Javier, thank you. And Exile in Bookville so much for being such ardent supporters of this weird little book. Rebecca, it is always a dream to talk to you. You are such a superstar, and I am waving my pom-poms at everything you write forever. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Chicago.
Thank you guys so much. And if you guys can just stick around, you two can stick around for a little after as people leave the room. But thanks everyone for showing up. Like Rebecca said, buy plenty of copies. We have signed book plates from Marie and actual signed books from Rebecca. I'd be happy to send them out to you, or come to the store, come to Chicago and visit us and come see the store. Thanks everyone. Have a good night. And we'll talk to you guys after.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
So we record these, and